The very first scene of the movie depicts a fast-driving car down the road, halting in front of an elegant building. Outside, we find several reporters impatiently awaiting the couple's arrival. Our protagonist, Penelope, introduces us to her parents, the graceful Jessica and the renowned Franklin Wilhern. They were born and raised in a world of luxury. Franklin, caught off guard, guides his wife through the throng into the hospital. In a wheelchair, Jessica is being pushed down the hallway, ready to give birth. Screaming out of fear, Franklin holds her hand in an attempt to take the edge off her pain and comfort her. They all walk into the room, followed by the journalists, on pins and needles, anticipating the baby's birth. In a flashback, Penelope takes us back to a curse that traces its origins to her early grandfather, Ralph. Back then, Ralph was head over heels in love with a servant girl named Clara. They were in a hidden relationship, waiting for the right moment to announce it. However, life has its own twists. Their clandestine relationship resulted in a pregnancy. When Ralph expressed his desire to marry Clara, his family laughed him out of the room. This painful rejection eventually led him to marry another girl. Heartbroken, Clara ended her life by taking a plunge off a cliff. Her mother, the witch of the town, was furious. She stormed into the property, spreading animal guts and casting a curse on the family. The curse says that the next Wilhern daughter will have a face resembling a pig, and the curse will be broken only by marrying a man from a respected family. For years, the successive 5 Wilhern brides had sons, dodging the bullet, much to their good luck. It wasn't until a century later that a Wilhern couple, Ella and Leonard Hugh Wilhern, had a daughter. However, the girl was born with a normal face with no deformations. Unbeknownst to Leonardo, his daughter is not a genuine Wilhern. Little does he know that his wife has played him for a fool, having cheated on him with their driver. The newborn baby was the offspring of their illicit tryst. Therefore, the curse reared its ugly head with the birth of Penelope. When Penelope was born, she was met with shock and disbelief by her family and doctors alike. A little girl with a pig face and weird ear flaps is destined to lead a life of misery. All of her childhood was spent within the confines of her house, deprived of the pleasures of life. Despite being locked away, she carved out a niche for herself, creating a joyful realm of her own. Until her 18th birthday, when she spends almost half of her day behind a two-way mirror, listening to wealthy suitors. It was her mother's suggestion. Being ever considerate, she hired Wanda, a professional matchmaker, in order to find a suitable man for her daughter to break the chains of the curse. In the ensuing scene, we discover Edward, a wealthy gentleman, standing in front of the glass mirror, addressing Penelope. With a heavy heart, he confides in Penelope that he has been feeling stuck in time and trapped in a gilded cage for a long period. Sharing one of her biggest struggles, he reveals that his sadness stems from his looks and good reputation, much to Penelope's dismay, when she learns that he has never been judged by the content of his character. Unwavering, Edward urges Penelope to reveal herself, for he believes that beauty is only skin deep. Initially hesitant, Penelope eventually shows up out of the blue, prompting Edward to scream loudly and flee the room hastily. In the meantime, Jessica jumps from her seat, screaming out of dread as she watches Edward run away. Jake, the butler, follows suit in an attempt to catch him before exposing Penelope's secret to the public. Jessica, ever protective of her daughter, blames her for revealing herself so soon. Penelope envelops her mother in a warm embrace, trying to alleviate her pain, while Jessica keeps cursing their stroke of bad luck that came upon them. However, she is the one reiterating that Penelope's true inner self goes beyond any mere appearance. Believing that the curse will be broken, a flashback unfolds on the screen, showing the ill-fated couple, Jessica and Franklin, waiting for the doctor with a glimmer of hope. However, their expectations are dashed to pieces when the doctor informs them that reducing Penelope's nose is a risky surgery that can eventually end her, since the carotid artery runs directly through her nose. A disheartening revelation. Rumors about Penelope's countenance spread like wildfire. Sensing the danger that can harm her daughter, Jessica, in order to secure her daughter a tranquil life, decides to keep Penelope hidden from the outside world. On the other hand, photographers, hell-bent on capturing a picture of the newborn baby, fail to do so. Lemon, a determined reporter, sneaks into their house and hides out in the cupboard, waiting for the right moment to catch a picture, much to his sorrow when he ended up with a blind eye. With no other solution, Jessica found herself compelled to take a drastic decision. She faked the demise of her daughter, and to eradicate any evidence that might uncover their secret, they had her coffin cremated. Nevertheless, Lemon kept following them, doubting their credibility and steadfastly taking revenge. In the following sequences, we depict Penelope's childhood spent indoors, devoid of any joys, a lonely, somber childhood. Nevertheless, Penelope attempted to escape the prison she was ensnared in, longing for a delightful existence. Once the children her age caught sight of her, they kept looking at her with disbelief, unable to fathom the size of her nose. Her mother, ever terrified, rushed towards her and brought her back home. Penelope, forced to adapt to her circumstances, spends her days within the confines of her toy-filled room, her only refuge, where she mastered the art of self-amusement with her imaginary friends who shared her journey. She was even homeschooled by her mother, who devoted her time to preparing her to be the suitable bride for the man destined to grace her life and break her free from the curse. Jessica forbade the consumption of pork and bacon in their household, in order to protect her daughter's emotions from deteriorating. Jake, the live-in butler, had been with them since Penelope's birth, witnessing her first steps and serving with unwavering dedication. Upon Penelope's 18th birthday, Jessica decided to hire Wanda, who was tasked with finding the most distinguished suitors for her daughter, thus breaking the curse, much to their frustration when each potential suitor ends up jumping from the windows following the mere sight of Penelope's face. Here comes Jake, who tirelessly keeps chasing them, escorting them back home, and securing their silence with a non-disclosure agreement. However, this time, Edward eludes his grasp. He rushes to the police station, barely catching his breath, to recount the frightening scene he has just endured. Little did he know that he would be mocked. Upon reporting Penelope as a pig monster with fangs, the officers burst into laughter, stating that ugliness is not a crime to deal with. However, Edward persists, urging them to take action. Much to their annoyance, they instead detain him for the night. Meanwhile, a man named Larry walks into the station, wondering whether the detainee is Edward Vanderman, to which the officer affirms Larry happens to be a newspaper editor, a rich substance for publishing an article, claiming that Edward has encountered a pig girl, a descent into madness, and a loss of touch with reality. In another part of the city, Jake, accompanied by Jessica and Wanda, are seen waiting in the car parked outside Edward's house. Anticipating his return, determined to make him sign the contract, exhausted, they fall into deep sleep until the following morning. When Edward finally returns home after being released, Edward ascends his steps and is all of a sudden struck by a newspaper, aggravating his mood as he reads the headline that says, "Vanderman suffers from a nervous breakdown." Enraged, Edward storms the newspaper's company and confronts Larry, demanding that he remove the article, fearing that his father's reputation will be affected. He complains about losing his position as chairman of the board following the accusations as a manic. However, Larry rebuffs his request for a retraction and instead calls for the security to escort Edward out. Having witnessed the scene, Lemon intervenes to rescue him once he hears Edward shouting, still reiterating the sight of the pig-faced girl. In the meantime, after checking the newspaper and sensing the danger that befalls them, Jessica, out of dread, decides to move to another city to protect Penelope from the paparazzi. Nevertheless, after further reflection, she declines the idea and instead persists alongside Wanda to find a suitable man for her daughter, arranging a blind date with 12 men. Later that night, Lemon recounts to Edward the sorrowful story of losing his eye once he got a glimpse of Penelope when she was a baby. A glimmer of hope lights up Edward's heart as he finds someone who believes his narrative. Therefore, they decide to join efforts to seek revenge. However, when Lemon questions Edward's willingness to revisit Wilherns' house, his imagination starts playing tricks with him, conjuring Penelope's ugly face. After dismissing the idea of returning to Wilherns' house, Lemon decides to find a suitable man for the mission. Therefore, he visits a quaint gambling parlor in the city, looking for Max. In the meantime, we depict Max playing his cards close to his chest, engrossed in gambling. Much to his dismay, he ends up losing his shirt, urging him to leave the place. At that exact time, Lemon walks in and spots him while leaving. He hastily addresses him, asking for a private conversation. He recounts his long history of throwing good money after bad, prompting a chuckle from Max, who ignores him and makes an exit to the door. However, Lemon, steadfast, suggests $5,000 in exchange for a favor, a suggestion that pricks up Max's ears, for he is in dire straits. The following day, we witness the candidates signing the legal gags, eagerly awaiting the sight of Penelope. Outside, we depict both Lemon and Edward anticipating Max's arrival. He shows up late after spending the night gambling. Lemon hands him a jacket with a hidden camera inside. With only the lift of an arm, the camera will be activated and will capture Penelope's face. Shortly after, Max walks into the house and introduces himself as Max Campion. Sent by the agency, he joins the candidates in the waiting room, who are impatiently expecting Penelope's appearance. Much to his tough luck, the camera starts going on the fritz. Therefore, he secretly hides behind the couch in an attempt to fix it. Penelope, all of a sudden, appears in front of them, throwing a spanner in the works, causing chaos. Upon observing her, not winning any beauty contest's face, they scream bloody murder and escape the room. The usual cut and run move. Lemon and Edward, concealed in the van, watch the suitors flee the house. Only Max remains in the room, as he was too busy fine-tuning the camera when Penelope revealed herself. Devastated, Penelope heads to the kitchen, returning to snacks to drown her sorrows. Annoyed, Penelope tries to convince her mother to quit these attempts since they are chasing rainbows. While confronting each other, Penelope's eyes fall on Max, who is seen sitting on the couch in the annex. Bewildered, Jessica and Wanda urge Penelope to rush back into the room. Soon, she catches Max stealing a first book edition from the family's collection. He hides it under his jacket, believing that it could bring him a good amount of money. Wondering about her favorite book, Penelope informs him that it is Moby Dick, placed on the third bookshelf. Penelope pretends to leave the room. Instead, she remains silent, examining Max. The latter grabs the book and exits the room, only to rush back in after a few seconds in an attempt to catch Penelope, but in vain. He approaches the glass mirror, staring at it for a while, but ends up leaving with no response. However, Penelope halts him, questioning his return the following day, which he confirms with a slight smile on his face. Jessica and Wanda's happiness is palpable. In the meantime, Max returns to the van and informs both Lemon and Edward that he couldn't catch a picture of Penelope. However, Max informs them that he will be back tomorrow. Much to their reassurance, he retrieves his jacket and hits the road. Back to his daily routine, we witness Max gambling in the same place, ending up in the same situation every time, throwing his money down the drain. The following day, he comes back, determined to capture the photo and accomplish the mission assigned. We catch sight of him on the couch, while Penelope keeps an eye on him behind the mirror. He notices a frog flute on the shelves. He picks it up and blows into it, prompting Penelope to ask him all of a sudden whether he plays music. Caught off guard, he throws her a curvy ball and asks her to guess which instrument he plays. Penelope brings a whole band into the room and makes him try every instrument available to discover Max's musical talent. He starts singing, playing the bass, but the melodies he performed were music to no one's ears. Therefore, she asks him to play the drums, the saxophone, and the guitar as well. However, he misses the beat on all of them. Even though Penelope comes up short in her attempts to uncover his hidden talent, we depict her enjoying the performance with a wide smile etched on her face. In the next few moments, we find them playing chess, with Max being responsible for moving her pieces, while conversing deeply about their lives, much to Max's enjoyment when he learns that she wants to be a horticulturalist, admitting that he imagined her as a great cop, taking into consideration her non-stop interrogation. Taken aback by Penelope's revelation that she had never had a beer, he suggests fleeing to the nearby Clover Dilly pub. However, much to his dismay, she kindly rebuffs the idea. On the other hand, unfazed, Max tries to push her out of her comfort zone, but he fails to do so. In order to make her feel better, Max admits that she is not missing much, apart from the vendors at the street fair and the park's garden. Continuing with his attempts to win the game, Penelope succeeds in overthrowing his queen. Back to his gambling habit, Max's failures keep haunting him. In the following morning, we depict both Lemon and Edward up in arms about Max's behavior and his inability to capture one picture of Penelope's face. Edward suspects his willingness to help them, since Penelope hastily revealed herself to him. He paints a picture of her as ugly and grotesque, prompting Max to attack him. Real evidence for Max's affection for Penelope. Out of rage, Max informs them to hit the road and find someone else for this mission. While he prepares himself to depart, Edward asks him to cough up the money, an impossible request since Max has blown it all. He finds himself between a rock and a hard place, obliged to adhere to their instructions. In the next scene, we see the usual discussion between Max and Penelope playing out in front of our eyes, while Penelope's family prepares themselves to watch their encounter. Penelope, ever stubborn, is still wondering about the instrument that Max plays. She suggests the piano, betting the farm on it. However, when he sits at the piano and starts singing, his fingers fall on the wrong keys, urging Penelope to guide him. She soon joins him, putting her hand on his. Little does she know that her expectations won't hold water. Once Max sees her, he jumps out of his skin, taken aback by the sight he is witnessing. We can sense Penelope's disappointment with Max's reaction, for she thought that he would be over the moon at seeing her. Max stands still in silence, processing the whole situation, while Penelope's eyes are brimming with tears. Max approaches her, extending his arm, intending to touch her nose, but unfortunately, it triggers the hidden camera, leaving him cursing his luck. The latter rushes downstairs, pointing the finger at her mother, believing that all of their attempts are a wild goose chase. Nevertheless, Jessica, steadfast in her quest, asks her daughter to give Max another chance. Noticing Wanda's presence next to her, Jessica rushes upstairs looking for Max, who has already flown the coop. He heads immediately towards the van, where Lemon and Edward are waiting for him with bated breath. Out of rage, he throws the camera on the ground, smashing it. He explains that Penelope is nothing like Edward said and asks them to leave her alone. While they are busy butting heads, Jessica and Wanda come out looking for Max, only to spot him talking to Lemon. Out of dread, they close the gate and rush back home. However, Max follows suit in an attempt to clarify things. Jessica, ever protective, lays bare his truth to Penelope as a spy. On the other hand, Penelope ignores her mother's accusations and instead approaches Max, admitting that she truly understands that her face turns his stomach and that she definitely wouldn't ask him to accept it. Yet it is only skin deep. She believes that her true self lies beneath the surface. She assures him that once the curse is broken, she will be as good as new. Max, with a heavy heart, wonders what she will be doing if the curse isn't broken. With eyes brimming with tears, she promises him to end it all and asks him to marry her. However, much to her dismay, Max declares that he cannot marry her. Jessica and Wanda hustle him out hastily, leaving Penelope crying on the stairs with broken dreams. Her mother is determined in her pursuit to find the ideal man for her daughter, but Penelope is cast adrift in a realm of her own, where nothing exists but disappointment and betrayal. Max, caught between a rock and a hard place, suffers from inner turmoil, depressed for turning Penelope down. He retreats to the piano, but his fingers let him down. Penelope, fed up with being stuck within the confines of the house, decides to spread her wings and escape her current life. while we depict her parents racking their brains over any available solutions to make her feel better. Penelope dons a scarf covering her mouth and nose and makes a break for it. The ensuing scene shows her wide-eyed amazement and bewilderment while exploring the city. In the meantime, Jessica discovers her daughter's disappearance. On the verge of a breakdown, she examines every part of the house, but in vain. She rushes towards the gates, calling for Penelope, but she is only met with silence. Lemon and Edward, ever the two watchful eyes, learn that Penelope has flown the coop. Therefore, they decide to track her down. In the following few moments, we find Penelope wandering leisurely in the garden, taken aback by the scenes unfolding in front of her. Fate leads her to a breathtaking fountain, where she finds kids playing around with infectious laughter and the vendors with their bright stalls. Her delight is palpable in the air, a sight she had always dreamed of witnessing. The real life outside the prison bars she was stuck behind. In the meantime, we depict Penelope's parents sitting by the phones, unable to lift a finger to find their missing daughter. Suddenly, they receive a phone call from Penelope, who calls them from a payphone. Jessica, at her wit's end, demands her daughter to disclose her whereabouts to bring her back home, but the latter turns a deaf ear to her mother's request. She only expresses how much she loves her parents, bids them farewell, and hangs up the phone with a heavy heart. Following that, Penelope seeks refuge in a hotel room, using her mother's credit card. In the meantime, we capture Max playing his cards close to his chest, immersed in his gambling routine, in an attempt to distract his mind from his tiring thoughts. On the other hand, Lemon and Edward are busy scheming a trap for Penelope. They succeed in getting a sketch artist to draw Penelope's face as described by Edward. In the morning, Jake hands Jessica the newspaper, only for her to go weak at the knees upon seeing her daughter's disparaging portrait on the front page, promising $5,000 for anyone who can capture an actual photo of her countenance. Soon, Penelope checks the newspaper, her heart skipping a beat when she finds that people are looking for her. Max, too, doesn't seem to be doing better. In the usual bar, we find him gambling until the sun comes out, with no gains to mention. When his friend joins the table, bemoaning his lot in life, Max realizes at that moment that he doesn't want to end up with a monotonous life. Therefore, he leaves the table quietly, while he still has some chips left. With no choice left, Penelope's parents turn to the police in order to locate their daughter. Confused, the police officer admits that he's clueless about Penelope. No photographs, no friends, no job, prompting Franklin to show him the picture in the newspaper, confessing that his daughter resembles the portrait minus the fangs, much to his astonishment. Jessica, sensing the officer's reluctance, asks Jake to bring her purse to pay him, only to find that her credit card is missing. In the meantime, Penelope keeps strolling down the streets, discovering every nook and cranny of the city, until finally returning to the hotel. Upon her entrance, she spots her parents begging the receptionist to give them the room's key. At that exact moment, the officer catches sight of Penelope, urging the three of them to follow suit. However, she succeeds in slipping through the window, while catching her breath after a marathon run. And since she can no longer use her mother's credit card to avoid tipping her hand, she decides to reach out to Lemon and Edward to sell her own pictures. Soon, we find both Lemon and Edward up to their ears in phone calls regarding Penelope's face. Exhausted, they both start losing heart until Penelope herself calls them, suggesting a meeting place to give them the picture and reclaim the money. Therefore, Penelope heads to the photo booth and gets the ball rolling. Later that night, while Lemon is waiting for her, Penelope delivers the pictures, lowering them in a paper bag from above the bridge. After getting her money, Penelope vanishes into thin air, leaving Lemon to mull over the whole story. Once he gets back to his office, he reprimands Edward, since Penelope has no fangs. With a serious tone, he urges Edward to give up the entire story. However, Edward, hell-bent on clearing his name, decides to publish the picture. The following day, Penelope's pictures are all over the town, leading Jessica to hit the deck once again. Penelope, however, heads to the Clover Dilly pub to have a beer, where she manages to keep her identity under wraps so far, with the scarf on her face. Shortly after, we depict Max storming into Lemon's office. Lemon, sensing his rage, explains that Edward insisted on publishing the picture despite his attempts to stop him. He confides in him that Penelope sold him her picture, declaring her independence. Max feels on top of the world with Penelope's courageous decision. While immersed in the pub's revelry, Annie, a delivery girl, walks in, conversing with the bartender, while Penelope lends an ear. Soon, she dives headfirst into their conversation and befriends Annie. Annie approaches Penelope wondering about the scarf covering her face, and the latter confirms that it is a bad nose job. Penelope, with limited knowledge, questions Annie about the Vespa, much to Annie's disbelief when she learns that Penelope has never ridden a Vespa, not by a long shot. On the other side of the city, Max, inspired by Penelope's bravery, visits his old-time band friend, Sam, wondering about his unexpected visit. Sam learns that Max is wishing for a second chance to turn the page. Despite being initially hesitant, Sam welcomes him back, but under one condition: To prove how trustworthy he is, he needs to first clean the floors. He ends up retreating to his longtime friend, the piano. He takes a seat and lets his fingers go with the flow, painting a marvelous musical composition. In a few following moments, we find Penelope exploring the city with Annie while on her delivery missions. Her fascination with the vibrant life in the streets is evident. With months passing by, her friendship with Annie gets stronger. Penelope keeps sending postcards to her parents, recounting her new adventures with the outside world. Jessica, perplexed yet determined to find her daughter, goes the extra mile. Accompanied by her husband, they follow the images on the postcards until they spot Penelope hanging around. A loud scream escapes Jessica's lung as she rushes towards her daughter. After a long run, Penelope arrives at the bar. However, being extremely exhausted, she falls to the ground, prompting Annie to take off the scarf to help her breathe, much to everybody's shock when they learn that she is Penelope. Waking up in the hospital, Penelope notices reporters surrounding her, seeking to capture her pictures. Much to her astonishment, she discovers that not a single soul has taken to their heels after exposing her face. While leaving the hospital, we depict Penelope being welcomed with open arms through the crowd. Her parents accompanied her to the car. However, Penelope refuses going back home. Instead, she prefers leaving with Annie. In the blink of an eye, Penelope becomes well known, with her name and pictures all over the newspapers. In the ensuing scene, within the confines of the court, reporters descend on Edward. One of them questions whether he attempted to file assault charges against Penelope. Edward's father steps in to save the situation, but Edward adds fuel to the fire. He describes her as a monster that belongs in a cage, shocking everyone present, earning him the label of a creep. Furious, his father scolds him for such a statement, admitting that despite her ugly countenance, the public loves Penelope. He twists his arm to fix the situation, believing that it could harm their company. In the next sequence, we witness Penelope's happiness at the bar playing alongside her friends. All of a sudden, Max appears in front of her. He confesses that she inspired him, but before he can even explain further, Penelope takes her leave. She is still hurt, unable to forget how he fell short of her expectations. Once she steps out of the bar, her mother herds her back home, revealing that a big surprise is waiting for her. She discovers Edward, wearing a fake sad countenance, apologizing for his deed, believing that he cannot run from his feelings anymore. Skeptical of his intentions, Penelope gives him the cold shoulder. However, her mother urges her to change her mind, taking into consideration that the curse can be broken. Jessica throws cold water on her spirits by reminding Penelope that those aren't her friends, but instead her fans, a mere talking pig. A few words, yet painful words, are enough to convince Penelope. Getting down on one knee, Edward proposes to Penelope, unveiling a breathtaking diamond ring. Their engagement appears in the newspapers with two cold faces. Next, we paint a picture of Lemon's annoyance upon reading the news. Suddenly, Larry barges in on his office with even bigger, shocking news. He wonders whether he can lend a hand in writing an article about the robbery case against Max Campion. Having a hard time swallowing the story, he visits the jail to get to the bottom of Max's motives. Much to his astonishment, he finds a completely different man. He ends up with an evident conclusion. The real Max pulled the wool over their eyes, and he is instead Johnny Martin. Following that, we find Penelope and her family, accompanied by Edward in the theater. At the end of the night, Edward encounters Johnny, perplexed. He takes Penelope under his wing and urges her to depart. However, Johnny, steadfast in his quest, halts them, addressing Penelope, trying to unmask Edward's true colors. To steer clear of another scandal, Edward whisks Johnny to the restroom, where the two have it out. Edward, with unshakable confidence, reveals that even though he doesn't love her, he is still the only one willing to marry her. He convinces Johnny to hold his tongue unless he wants to hurt Penelope once again. At a late hour of the night, while Johnny is immersed cleaning the bar, a familiar voice calls out his name. It is none other than Lemon. Lemon confesses that through all these years, he was searching for a wounded ego and a missing eye. With no axe to grind against Penelope, Johnny throws in the towel, believing that Penelope's curse will at least be broken. Unfortunately, he cannot marry her since he is not cut from the same cloth. Much to Lemon's sadness, the following morning is the wedding day. We set the scene with people gathering in their elegant dresses and luxurious tuxedos, eagerly awaiting the start of the ceremony. The day when we witness love coming into full bloom between Annie and the bartender. Soon after, while Jessica is shown playing hostess and dotting the I's and crossing the T's with the last preparations, Lemon pays her a visit. He hands her a research file regarding Johnny, explaining his reluctance to marry Penelope after learning about the truth. Jessica, however, makes an executive decision to hide it from Penelope, believing that it is too late. Wanda, on the other hand, insists that Penelope is entitled to the whole 9 yards, but Jessica warns her to forget about it. Here comes the scene, both Penelope and Edward standing in front of the priest, delivering their vows. When it's Penelope's turn, and after being asked if she would take Edward as her husband, she answers with a no, much to everybody's surprise and Edward's delight. Like a bolt from the blue, Penelope runs off to her room, locking the door behind herself, ignoring her mother's beseeching to go back. In a state of distress, she confesses that she loves herself the way she is. Suddenly, A series of flashbacks unfold in front of our eyes, from Penelope's early years until the current moment. When she wakes up, she discovers that her nose is evenly shaped. The curse is finally broken, since the person of her own kind who had to claim her was herself. In the next scene, Penelope keeps on checking her new nose until Jessica walks in. The latter, crying tears, admits failing as a caring and loving mother over the years and blames herself for ignoring the truth. However, Penelope envelops her in a warm embrace, promising that their lives will be better. At that exact timing, since Jake is no longer needed within the family, he takes his belongings and walks away, ignoring Jessica's calls, freeing himself from long years of service. Surprisingly, Jake turns out to be the witch in disguise since the beginning. Turning 25 years old, Penelope leaves the house to pursue her own dreams. We see her as a successful, lovable teacher. In order to come clean with Edward, she sends him a letter apologizing for leaving him on their wedding day. After keeping it for so long, Wanda couldn't hold herself back from revealing Johnny's truth to Penelope, a revelation that saddened her heart. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Following that, here comes Halloween. Yet this year, costumes are inspired by Penelope's piggy face. Deciding to take the bull by the horns, Penelope puts on a mask and heads to the party accompanied by Annie, in the hope of meeting Johnny. Upon reaching his apartment door, Annie pretends that Penelope needs the bathroom and makes an excuse to leave them alone. He allows her inside, and after some chit-chat, she learns that Johnny is leaving the town for a while in order to start over and avoid any gambling temptations. Suddenly, he reveals that through Halloween he has been running into someone he used to know. Seizing the opportunity, Penelope wonders whether that person meant a lot for him, which he confirms without any hesitation. In a flash, Penelope spots the piano, confirming her guess. At that exact moment, Johnny pulls her from the hand and kisses her passionately, a long-awaited kiss. Johnny apologizes for leaving her since he is unable to break the curse. Penelope takes off the mask and reveals that the curse has been broken by herself. With happiness shining through his eyes, Johnny grabs her face into his hand, and they are both transported into a realm full of love and devotion. We reach the end of this tale when we depict Penelope and Johnny recounting their story to kids in order to get the lesson behind it. Don't judge a book by its cover, for true beauty comes from within. In the final act, we witness their happy moments. Lemon, ever the keen eye, appears in the background with his camera, willing to capture a picture, but eventually dismisses the idea, respecting their privacy. We are left with a strong belief that embracing one's uniqueness is all that matters.